Hi, everyone. This is Argo Visa's very first time going live on YouTube, and I see that we already have some people joining us. Thank you guys so much for making time to speak to an ex visa officer. That's what I am. My name is Mandy Fierbacher. I used to be a consular officer with the U.S. Department of State. I worked with the State Department for about 7 years, and I worked in multiple countries in China at the US Embassy in Beijing and also at the US Consulate in Mexico. And I spent my final 2 years at the US Consulate in Hong Kong. And so the really interesting thing about spending so much time doing visa work and doing consular work is that, it's good to get experience in different areas. I have experience, a lot of experience with student visas. Every place I worked, we would do a student visa week at the embassy or the consulate where we would welcome in students who were coming to apply for fall semester. So generally, students can only apply for a visa starting about 4 months before their program start date. So I know we got some questions about this, and I'll go into that a little bit more later. But that means that traditionally, and this is before the pandemic, starting in about March, we start getting very busy with student visa applicants. Now, if you are a student who has been denied a visa before, you might be getting ready to go in for your visa interview right now because you'll want to apply again, perhaps for spring semester or winter quarter because you weren't able to make it for fall semester. So we'll talk about that as well. So spent 7 years with the State Department. I have a ton of experience with student visas, but I also have a lot of experience with H-1B and L-1 visas. When I worked at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing, China, I was actually in charge of the H visa and the L visa portfolio, which means that any consular officer that had, issues with H visa interview or L visa interviews would actually refer those cases to me in what's called administrative processing. Some of you guys might know of this term. And so I was actually in charge of figuring out how to proceed with these cases, if we had to do additional investigation, if we had to pull in, the fraud prevention unit. And then if there really was fraud, we would, there would have to be a revocation memo that was written. And so that was all sort of handled by my department. Now, in Mexico, I had some really interesting experiences as well because I dealt with a lot of student visa issues on the border. I know, especially because of the pandemic, many of you, if you already have a student visa and you're currently in the United States, you don't really want to fly all the way back to your home country. There were travel bans in place, and actually, those travel bans were lifted November 8th, but then there's new travel bans put in place for South Africa. And, so there's always that to be worried about. And so for some people, they would rather go over the border to Mexico or Canada to get their visa stamping renewal done there. But what I saw in Mexico was that this is actually a more complicated process than what people expect. And if you, have any issues with your visa, then you could potentially get stuck, in Canada or in Mexico. And what people end up doing is if they end up being in administrative processing for weeks or months at a time, they would actually have to fly all the way back to their home country to wait for, the administrative processing to complete. Okay, so I see I'm getting a lot of questions. We also got some great questions on our Instagram. So I am going to start with those and feel free, if you have any questions, please put it into the chat box. I'll be able to see it and I'll go through them. Let's try to ask questions that could apply to, more people instead of very specific questions because it's very difficult to answer specific questions without really knowing your full travel history, your full visa history, without the context. One other thing I want to mention before I get started answering questions is that, Argo Visa, we are a company of former visa officers. All of our officers have made decisions and interviewed over 10,000 people, which is a lot. I myself have interviewed over 100,000 people. So, we just have a lot of experience understanding what how a visa officer thinks, what is in our mindset, what is our goal in asking these questions, because a lot of times we are asking questions, to understand the context of your situation and not getting specific answers from you. We're actually asking you to show us rather than tell us, the questions that we're really asking. So, you can find out more information about us at argovisa.com. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, and as you know, we're on YouTube and we're always putting out new videos. So please feel free to join us. And you can also send us emails about your case at hello@argovisa.com, and we can share with you how we can help you. You can sign up for a consultation with an ex visa officer where we understand every aspect of your life, from your travel history, your educational history, your marriage, your relationship history, and help you understand how your personal situation can affect your visa status and your plans in the United States. So, this is our specialty, this is our area of expertise. And, we are the only people behind the visa window making these decisions, or who have made these decisions day in and day out. And this is why we have so much experience with this. And this is not really something that immigration attorneys can help you with, because as you know, if you've ever been to a visa interview, you can't bring anybody with you. You can't bring an immigration attorney, you can't bring your parents. So this is something that you kind of have to handle on your own, and you have to be prepared for the visa interview. And this is what we do at Argo Visa. We make sure that you feel comfortable going into your visa interview. We make sure to help you understand what are the risks in your case, how do you minimize those risks, how can you be honest with the visa officer in a way that's not going to hurt you. All of those questions you can ask us during a consultation with a former visa officer, a former consular officer. Okay, so let me get started. So, a few really good questions. So, does a visa officer have your answers to your previous interviews if you have been denied before? This is such a great question. And the answer is, for the most part, yes. So you might notice, if you've had a visa interview before, that the visa officer sometimes is doing a lot of typing as you're talking. They're asking you questions, they're listening. Sometimes they're not even looking at you really, but then they're typing out, something into their computer. And what they're doing is they're typing notes of this interview process. So they might take notes on, okay, you mentioned that you've never been married before, that you don't have any family in the US. And what they're also doing mentally is cross checking this information that you're giving them with information that you have put in your DS 160, and also from other sources that we might have gathered. So, so this is why it is so important to always, always, always be really honest during your visa interview, because when you lose credibility with a consular officer, once they see that in one area of your situation that you have lied to them, then they're not likely to trust anything that you're going to tell them, because they're not going to be able to tell, which part is truthful, which part are lies. And so, as long as you're completely honest with a visa officer, that is the best way to gain trust and to get that interview off on the right foot. Okay. So, so yeah, the answer is, to that question, does a visa officer have your answers to your previous interviews if you have been denied before? The answer is yes. They're taking notes on your answers in the interview. They're assessing your credibility. They are basically leaving notes for the next visa officer who is going to get your case if you ever apply again, on how trustworthy you are. That is the entire exercise of a visa interview, is determining whether or not you are trustworthy, and whether or not your plans show that, or your situation shows that you have immigrant intent, which means, are you planning on going to the United States and not coming back? So that is the idea of immigrant intent. And what you have to prove to the visa officer is that you can overcome immigrant intent, that you don't actually have immigrant intent if you're applying for a non-immigrant visa, like, a temporary visa, basically, like a student visa, or, a tourist visa, that you're actually planning on just staying for that temporary period and you're planning on returning to your home country. Um, there are also some visa categories that do have dual intent, like the H-1B, and so but it is still very important to be prepared for your visa interview. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. So, is it a problem? I'm thinking that this person is a student visa applicant. Is it a problem if I have a visa appointment in December while my program doesn't start until the following May? So that's 6 months. So, there is a rule that you actually cannot receive a visa until 4 months, that's 120 days before your program start date. So there are no rules about when you need to have your visa appointment. So this means that you can actually go in for your visa appointment in December. And if you get approved, what the visa officer will probably say to you is, your visa is approved, but I can't print it right now because, it's too early. You're going to have to come back within the 120-day window to get your visa printed. Now, that makes things a little bit more complicated because then you can either take your passport back and they can contact you when they're ready to print your visa, but you have to make multiple trips to the embassy or consulate. Um, what I would recommend, if you're able to get a visa appointment, if you're a student, if you're able to get a visa appointment within 120 days, you know, do that. But if that's not possible, then you can get the earliest available appointment, but just be prepared that you're not going to be able to get your visa until 120 days before your program start date. Okay, so the next question is, how can we convince the officers of long periods of gap in education? So I think it's all anything that is going on in your life circumstances, it is all about how you explain yourself. So what we do in Argo consultations is we take the time to get to know you, to understand your life situation. And if I were doing an Argo consultation with this person, I would ask, okay, so it looks like you have long periods of gaps in your education. You finished high school and then you waited 3 years before you went to your undergraduate. And then you waited another 5 years before you went to your master's degree. Can you tell me what you were doing during that time? Because this is the mindset of a visa officer, right? They want to understand exactly what happened. And if you don't have a good answer for that, that could be problematic because, maybe you just decided to take some time off. You were so tired after you're getting your bachelor's degree. It was a really tough degree in some type of engineering. You wanted to take a break and get some work experience. That's totally fine. But if you don't have a good answer, like if you just say, hey, I was lazy and I didn't do anything. I mean, that's probably not a very good way to talk to a visa officer who's about to approve a 4-year visa for you to go study in a US institution. So, it would what's helpful for us as ex visa officers in helping clients like this is we really try to understand what you were doing in those gaps and how to discuss your situation truthfully in a way that is positive for the visa officer. It's not always bad to take a break. Maybe you were worried about your mental health. Maybe just really, really wanted to get work experience before you knew what kind of master's degree you wanted to get. All of that is totally acceptable. But what's important is that you're prepared with a truthful response that is natural. I think the biggest problem that I used to see as a visa officer is that for some reason, visa applicants and especially student visa applicants seem to get these ideas in their head that they have to have the perfect answer or they have to have the right answer. The truth is that there is actually no perfect answer. I mean, there is only a perfect answer for your own situation. There isn't a perfect answer that, somebody is going to be telling you on an internet forum, hey, you need to say this response, and that is what's going to let you get the visa. Because, visa officers are human. We're always looking at you, gauging a response, trying to understand your situation. And, I made a YouTube video about this once, but the most important factor in getting your visa approved and having a successful visa interview experience is to make sure that your situation makes sense to an American officer. Um, So it's really important that you can see your case through the eyes of an American visa officer so that you understand, okay, does this make sense or is this going to be problematic? And a lot of times, it's not even like what your answer is wrong. It's just that visa officers don't understand and they're working under a lot of time pressure. Sometimes they're making, decisions in under a minute on whether or not to allow you to go to the United States, whether or not you're approved or denied a visa. And so, you need to be truthful, but you need to be honest in a way that is culturally acceptable to an American officer. And that is what we help you with at Argo Visa. And so sometimes, your answer, it's a great answer because you're being honest, right? But you need to provide a little bit more context, a little bit more explanation of why your situation is the way that it is. But you can't ramble on and talk on and on because, visa officers don't have a lot of time. But you also can't give one word answers, which is the most frustrating experience as a visa officer is just to get a one word experience, one word answer. For example, when I ask, why are you going to the United States? And a student visa applicant says to study. Well, I already know that you're going to study because I have your I-20 in my hand. So that's not a very helpful answer that has, given me any additional information about what's going on in your situation. So at Argo, what we do is we really help you understand the mindset of a visa officer, but also to help you frame your situation in a way that makes sense to an American officer. Because when we work with you, we take 30 minutes or an hour or sometimes even more to work with you so we fully understand your situation and we know the best way to frame it in a way that is truthful. Okay, so sorry, that was a very long-winded answer for how can we convince the officers of long periods of gap in education. But to wrap that up, it's really about what you did during that time and how to explain your situation in a way that will be understood by the visa officer and that won't negatively affect your visa situation. Okay, so, what is the normal time of administrative processing? And is this under the control of the US Embassy or other organizations? This is an amazing question. I'm so glad that someone asked this question. So, first of all, it really depends on why you are in administrative processing. So, there are so many reasons for administrative processing. Administrative processing is basically just a a definition, a term that means that your visa cannot be approved right now. We have to do something else to it. But it could be for as simple of a reason as, oh, your passport is about to expire, so we can't put a new visa stamp in it. So you're going to have to go get a new passport and then come back so we can give you your visa. Or it could be something like, oh, you forgot your I-20. Well, we need to see your I-20 before we can approve your visa. So I'm going to put you in 221G administrative processing until you bring back this paperwork that we need. So keep that in mind. It could be for something that you forgot to bring that they really need to see. So those are the easier types of administrative processing. And for those, if you're just missing something or there's something additional they want to look at, it could be as fast as a week or two before they make a decision on your visa. Now, even if they ask you for something additional and you bring it, doesn't necessarily always mean that your visa is going to get approved. It means that they want to review whatever it is you're bringing and then they're going to make a decision. And so at Argo Visa, we always believe in, you know, helping you be as successful as possible, which means that we want you to get it right the very first time. The very first time you go in for your interview, we want you to get approved. We don't want you to have to deal with the hassle of administrative processing because you forgot to bring something or you couldn't explain something clearly. So they have to go back and do additional investigations. So we helped you, make sure that you're fully prepared because being put in administrative processing is a really agonizing process. For some people, yes, you can get your visa in a week or two, depending on what you're missing. But for other people, there might have to be additional processes that they do, in the back office or at the State Department before you can get it. And that could take weeks, sometimes months. And unfortunately, I've even heard of people getting stuck in administrative processing for years. So if that is you, at Argo, we are visa problem solvers, send us an email at hello@argovisa.com if you've been in administrative processing for longer than, you know, for longer than 2 weeks. And actually, if you're in administrative processing, just go ahead and contact us because sometimes, there are problems with what happened during the interview that the officer doesn't understand, and perhaps, there's something that we can do to help the visa understand, help the visa officer understand what happened. So, to answer the question again, there is actually no quote unquote normal period of time for administrative processing. It can go from weeks to years, and it is not sometimes, oftentimes, depending on what type of administrative processing it is in control of the US Embassy or consulate, like a document that you're missing. But sometimes it needs to go for additional processing in Washington, D.C. at the main State Department. And that's usually when things take quite a long time. It could take 3 weeks, it could take 6 weeks, it could take months. If you've ever had any visa complications, like you have a visa ban or a visa ineligibility and you need a waiver, sometimes that can take between 4 to 6 months. And that time is even crazier because of the pandemic. And there's a big backlog for immigrant visas, and there's a backlog for tourist visas. Actually, a lot of places are not even doing tourist visas. So just keep that in mind that things are taking longer right now because of what's going on with COVID-19. Okay. So, someone named Sid Reddy asked, my job experience and my aspiring masters are two different fields. I'm really worried about this. Okay. So, I can think of a lot of situations where it might make sense for your job experience up to a certain point to be very different from what you are applying to do a master's degree in. But again, it's all going to be how you answer that question. So for Sid, what I would say is, I would need to know more context about the case, like what kind of job were you working in, and now what type of master's degree are you applying for? Is there a reason? Because, and again, remember that you have to understand things from an American point of view. So Americans do change jobs all the time. They're changing careers, they're changing subjects, they're changing majors. So this is not actually that unique of a situation, but it is about how you explain it. Most people are not able to explain anything because they're so nervous that this is such a big problem that, they kind of just do the deer in headlights look when the visa officer says, okay, well, I see that you were working, you know, in technical sales. Why is it now you want to go get a master's degree in biology? It doesn't make any sense. And what visa applicants usually do is they're just like, oh my God, I don't know how to answer that question. If I answer it wrong, I'm not going to get the visa. And so once they start hesitating and being nervous, that arouses the suspicion of the visa officer who's like, well, if it's a truthful answer, then it shouldn't take time for you to think up what the response is. But, I also know how stressful it is to go to a visa interview, and sometimes you're so nervous about, saying the wrong thing. Like, I myself, like, I'm a terrible test taker, so I get really nervous before tests, and it's not because, I'm not gonna be, like, totally honest on the test and taking it, but it just makes me nervous, and I know there are a lot of applicants who are very nervous about this process, and this is why an Argo consultation is so helpful because we run through everything, with you. We tell you how short it's going to be, what are, some things that could come up during your visa interview, how can you be prepared so you can have peace of mind through this whole process, which I think is more important than anything. So in response to Sid, um, you know, it doesn't matter that your job experience and your aspiring masters are completely different fields. It's more about how you answer those questions that are coming your way. And you don't know what those questions are. So you kind of have to be prepared to know your situation and explain it in a way that makes sense to an American officer. And if you have any questions, Sid, feel free to send us an email at hello@argovisa.com. We're happy to share with you how we can help. Okay, so next question. My job experience oh, sorry, I already answered that question. Will a 214B refusal for a tourist visa affect an immigrant visa application in the future? So this is a great question. So what I'll say is that usually a 214B refusal, which is a refusal for lack of ties or for immigrant intent, um, it will more likely affect your next non-immigrant visa application, like if you're applying again for the same visa category, like if you're a student visa applicant, you got denied your student visa applicant, now you're applying again, that will likely affect it. Most definitely will affect it. Or if you're applying it for a tourist visa, that will affect it as well. But a 214B refusal is actually less likely to affect an immigrant visa application because what they're saying is that you have immigrant intent, so we can't give you this temporary visa right now. Now, if you then go and apply for an immigrant visa with which you can legally go to the United States and move there and reside there, then that basically means that, you're fine because you either have, family members who are able to petition for you, or you have a really good job offer that you're able to get to take. And so, again, just generally speaking, an a non-immigrant visa refusal, like a 214B refusal, is less likely to affect an immigrant visa application. However, I don't know this person's personal situation, and there are always personal circumstances and factors that could affect the answer for that question. So, this is why it's so important for you to have a consultation with an ex visa officer to do one-on-one guidance and to help you do one-on-one strategy to figure out what this will look like behind the visa window, because you really only have one chance with an immigrant visa application. If they determine that you were not being honest, or for some other reason, perhaps you have an ineligibility, then they can actually revoke the petition, and then you wouldn't be eligible to immigrate to the US. So immigrant visa applications are very, very high stakes. Non-immigrant visa applications, tourist visas, student visas are also very high stakes because every time you interview, there's notes in the system about the interview, and it's going to affect your next chances of getting a visa. But an immigrant visa application is even more high stakes because you can't just get denied a visa and then just reapply the following week the way you can with a student visa or a tourist visa. You actually have to refile the petition, and then you're going to have to deal with, why your petition was revoked the first time and why the visa was not issued. And it's questionable whether or not you'll get your next visa approved, but if you are eligible for an immigrant visa, you'll definitely want to try, even if you have problems. So again, if you have issues, email us at hello@argovisa.com. Okay, so the next question is, can you apply for an immigrant visa within the United States once you have an F1 visa? Okay, so the short answer is yes, you can apply for an immigrant visa within the United States and adjust status once you have an F1 visa. But I really caution you on this, because if you don't have an F1 visa yet and your intent is to go to the US on a non immigrant visa, on a temporary visa, and then get an immigrant visa, um, that is going to be a big problem for you at your non-immigrant visa interview, because clearly you already have immigrant intent. That means you don't qualify for your non-immigrant visa. Now, if you're already in the US on an F1 visa and something happened, like perhaps you got a job opportunity, or something that will allow you to stay permanently in the US, then yes, you can adjust status, but you've already had your visa interview, you've already had your schooling in the US, and your circumstances have changed. So keep in mind that those are two very different situations. And, if you have not gotten your F1 student visa yet, that could be problematic. Um, and if you have questions about that, we can help you at hello@argovisa.com. Okay, so oh my gosh, I've gotten so many questions in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and start at the beginning. Okay, so someone asked, if I have a permanent residence in another country that I live, does it help me to get an F1 visa? So this question is really dependent on where your original country is and where is your permanent residence in this other country, because it depends. Not all countries are the same. And so it could help depending on what you're doing in that second country. Perhaps you're studying, perhaps um, you know, uh, for any number of reasons, you could be somewhere else. But this would be the kind of situation where it's a little bit out of the ordinary that you have permanent residence in a second country. So, for anything out of the ordinary, I would highly recommend that you sign up for an Argo consultation so we can help you evaluate your case. Okay, so same person says, my husband had two tourist visas denied. Now we're going to apply for an F2 visa for him. What should we explain to the officer in the DS 160? So, the first thing I would say is to make sure that you're honest in the DS 160. Like, for example, it'll ask your husband, have you ever been denied a visa before? And so many people think that, we don't check that answer and they'll say no, even though they've been denied before. But that will already tell the visa officer that you are not credible and that you don't tell the truth. So, they're going to just disregard all of your other answers. So it's so important that you're truthful on the DS 160. So make sure that you're truthful on the DS 160 and that you say that, your husband has been denied a visa before. But again, this is a type of situation, I do a lot of webinars like this, live videos, but it's actually really hard to answer people's questions like this in just a short snippet because what I really need to do is understand your full situation. Like this person, how long have you been married? How long has, the wife been in the US on a student visa? You studying? Will you be graduating? What are your plans in the future? Do you have kids together? All of these questions are really, really important in helping you formulate a good strategy for, okay, you've already had two visas denied. The last thing you want to do, one insight I want to share with you guys is if you've been denied a visa before, you never want to go in for another interview without preparing with an expert because the first problem is that you don't know why you were denied a visa. Okay. You think you know why you were denied a visa. A lot of times, this is a lot of the problems that we get with our Argo clients is they say, well, I got denied a visa because of my sponsor. My sponsor is in the United States, or I got denied a visa because I said that I was not married. And so what visa officers are looking at is they're looking at the entire situation, your entire life circumstances. And just because the last question they asked you, was something related to your marriage or related to your travels or to your education before they didn't, handed you the 214B denial letter, that doesn't mean that that was the reason why you were denied. So, first, if you've been denied a visa, figure out why you were denied a visa, and then you can actually go in and be prepared to address that specific issue that caused you the visa denial. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, okay, well, how will I know why I was refused? You're telling me that, it's not because of the last question I was asked. An Argo consultation is how you find out why you were denied a visa because you are talking to somebody who has years and years and years of experience approving and denying visa cases. We've had so many clients come to us and say, I wasn't even given a chance to talk to the visa officer. They asked me two questions and then they denied me. But once I asked them to describe what happened in that interview, once I asked them, okay, did this happen? Was somebody standing next to the visa officer? How long did they type into the computer? Once I start understanding the questions that were asked, I know exactly why this person was refused a visa. And so do, our team of Argo officers, because we know why we used to deny visas and we know what questions we would ask and how we would understand. So the first step is find out why you were denied your visa, sign up for an Argo consultation to do that. And the second step is to figure out how to address those problems that caused you the visa denial in the first place. Um, and it's not as direct as you think. Like some people think like, okay, it says that I was denied because I have lack of ties. So what a lot of people will do is they'll go into their next interview and they'll just say, okay, I have lots of ties. Here, let me show you all of my ties because you told me that I have a lack of ties. Well, lack of ties is a very general term used to give you a quick explanation so you can leave the window and allow the visa officer to continue on with their work. But there is actually more specific reasons why you were refused in your life circumstances. And we help you figure out what that is and we help you address it in an honest way, I might add. Okay. So Mohammed asks, what other things do visa officers consider other than the interview and the DS 160? Do they have other sources? Are some visa interviews pre-decided? So this is a great question. So visa interviews are never pre-decided. Visa officers don't even look at your DS 160 until probably about 30 seconds as you are walking up to the window. Then they're able to scan the DS-160 really quickly. There's always a few important questions that we're looking at. Have you been refused a visa before? Do you have family in the US? Do you pose a security risk to the United States? We're looking for those answers in your application so we know how to begin the interview and what we want to ask about. So interviews are never pre-decided. So what other things do visa officers consider other than the interview and the DS-160? Actually, I would say that probably 90% of the time, I'm not giving a specific statistics. Sorry, maybe not 90%. A huge majority of the time, the interview is only about just how you answer the questions and a little bit of the DS-160 because that sets us up to prepare us for the visa interview. But it is almost entirely based on the interview because visa officers don't like to look at documents. You might have had this experience. You try to give documents to a visa officer and they say, "No, thank you. I don't want to look at it. I don't need to look at it. No, thanks. Please don't push that through the window." Um, and this is because visa officers know that uh, documents can be forged. You can go to a black market and buy bank statements. You can buy housing documents. You can buy car documents. So we don't rely on pieces of paper that you bring to us. What we rely on is the interview itself and how you are, because visa officers really see the visa interview process as a one on one interaction between themselves and the visa applicant. So they want to look into your eyes. They want to see that you're being honest. They want to know, what are your goals in the US and try to understand you in the few minutes that they have. Um, so to sum up Muhammad's question, it is all about the interview. It's a little bit about the DS-160. You always want to be honest on your DS-160. And do we have any other sources? So in some cases, once a visa gets approved, it does go through some additional layers of security checks to make sure that you have no problems, no previous problems. So this is, we're connected to an FBI database. We're connected to other sources of information. And so if you, for example, have ever been arrested in the United States and you've been fingerprinted, that will come up in your visa interview. So if that's something that has happened to you, definitely work with an expert before your next visa interview because you're likely to be facing a very tough interview because we want to understand what happened that made you have this, this legal or this criminal history. So we do some back office checks to make sure that you're not a dangerous individual and you haven't been to court because you committed shoplifting or and you got arrested. So any sort of arrest, anytime you're fingerprinted for criminal activity, that will come back to us and you will have a very tough visa interview. So you need to be prepared. Okay. Okay, Sushma asked, can a visa be denied in administrative processing in the case of an H-1B? This is such a great question. Thank you for asking this questions because so many visa applicants, H-1B visa applicants think that, oh, as long since, an H-1B visa is dual intent, actually, I've talked to my immigration attorney and they can't deny me under Section 214B of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which means that I should get my visa approved. That is absolutely not true. And this is because just because your case doesn't get denied under 214B doesn't mean that the visa officer, if they don't want to approve your visa, they can just put you in administrative processing. We don't know for how long. Like I mentioned, it could be months or even years while they figure out, something is wrong with your case and they haven't figured it out. So, oftentimes, in the case of complicated H-1B cases, if an applicant is not prepared or somehow doesn't qualify for some reason, then visa officers will use administrative processing as a way to deny the case or at least not make a decision on the case. But at least the case is not getting approved, and so that's not something that you want because it will delay your start date at your company, obviously, and it could be a huge issue for you.
Oh, T2K says, Mandy, come visit the US Embassy in Nepal. I wish I could. I'm no longer a consular officer. I should just make sure that you guys understand that. I'm a former consular officer, but I no longer work with the State Department, which is why I'm able to so openly talk to you guys about all this information. Okay, so somebody said, I would like to ask you, does travel history matter for B1, B2, or F visa? For example, if I have a few Schengen visas, will the visa officer be more comfortable approving me a visa? So Nasir, this is a great question. Um, yes, I think that travel history matters a lot for tourist visas because for a lot of consular officers, if you're going to the United States for tourism, which I know there's very limited appointments for that right now, but just for future reference, um, if you've never been anywhere and you're on the other side of the world, say you're in Nepal or say you're in China, and you say, okay, I want to go for 2 weeks to Hawaii. Um, they're going to say, well, are you normally a traveler? Are you normally a tourist? They like to see that you have actually been a tourist before, so you understand, what it means to travel. Instead of saying, "Okay, for my very first trip ever, I'm going to take this 14-hour flight all the way from, China to California and then to Hawaii," because again, think about it. It has to be from an American perspective, and Americans are generally not big travelers if they've never gone anywhere close by before. So to them, this is very strange. So if you're someone, so Nasir, if you're someone who does have a few Schengen visas and you've traveled on them, it will definitely be a positive factor in your favor. However, they're still going to look at your life circumstances, your other ties to your home country to decide whether or not you qualify for a visa. The travel history is just one factor, and in your case, it would be positive. Okay. Okay, so somebody says, Sushma asked, my case has been 4 months in administrative processing. Could you please help me? Yes, we absolutely can help you. Please send us an email at hello@argovisa.com. Explain your whole situation, and we can give you an assessment and how we can help you with a consultation and what we can do to hopefully, help you understand your situation and what's going on there. Because I know oftentimes when cases disappear into administrative processing, it's just like a black box. One thing I will say, Sushma, is that when you're in administrative processing, you should be reaching out to your embassy or consulate approximately every 10 days or so. You have to be very polite, of course, but definitely reach out and ask for a status update on your case. Okay, so Nikita says, hi, Mandy. Can we get a visa after two visa refusals, an F1 visa? It's possible. So every time you get refused a visa, it becomes more difficult to get a visa approved because there's more notes in the system. And, visa officers tend to be very good friends with their fellow colleagues, their fellow visa officers. And so when someone comes to my window and I see that somebody has had five prior visa refusals from all of the people that I have lunch with every day, it's going to make me feel very uncomfortable approving a visa after five of my colleagues and friends have already evaluated the case and decided that this person doesn't qualify. So, but however, I want to mention that it is possible. I myself have definitely approved visas after six or seven visa denials just because visa officers are so busy that oftentimes they don't really have time to look deeply into a situation. When they see a case with a lot of visa refusals, two or more, then their default mode is to just refuse it because it's easy to do and it's much harder to get the visa officer to help you understand their situation because you already have a couple strikes against you. So, in those cases, I think it's really important to take the time to prepare for your next visa interview. We can help you do that so you understand why you were refused the first two times. Because I myself have approved visas after six denials, seven denials, because I was the first visa officer to actually take some time to look into somebody's case and decide, oh, well, I don't think all the other officers really understood this person's situation, or maybe this person just doesn't really present himself very well, even though He clearly is a good student and all of these other things, but he's very nervous about speaking English, different things like that. So it could be any number of factors. So it is possible to get your visa approved after numerous denials, but you have to prepare with an expert. You have to know how to address the problems that gave you the visa refusals in the first place. Okay, so Shava asked, "Hi Mandy, I'm in South Africa. My F1 visa is in administrative processing and my passport is being held by the consulate. Given the situation, how long do you think it will take to process?" So Chava, it will really depend on the reason for your administrative processing. Again, it could be any number of reasons, but if you get in touch with us at hello@argovisa.com, we can help you. Or if you guys want to, you can even go ahead and just sign up for an Argo consultation directly at argovisa.com. And then you'll be asked, a bunch of questions like where are you applying for a visa? And then we'll give you a detailed questionnaire that you have to fill out. And that way we can prepare for the consultation to give you a strategy for how to get that visa approved or unstuck if it's in administrative processing. So if this is something that, you're urgently wanting to address, you can just directly sign up for a consultation at argovisa.com, click book a consultation. And for complicated situations like administrative processing, I would always select prior refusal slash complicated case because that's a 1 hour consultation instead of 30 minutes. Our 30-minute consultations are traditionally for people who have never been refused a visa, and you just want to make sure you're prepared from the very beginning so that you don't have any problems. Okay, so Hiba asked, "I'm going to apply for an F1 visa. Can you guide me on what kind of questions they may ask in this interview?" Okay, so a few questions that will likely come up for the F1 visa interview is why are you studying in the United States, first of all? Now there's a lot of overseas educational opportunities everywhere. So why specifically the United States? Next, they will probably want to know why you chose this specific school. And let me just give you a hint. Please don't, recite the number of acres the school has or how, it has the most beautiful campus in the world. I mean, actually, that might be a good reason. I don't know, but try not to read facts off of the university brochure because that immediately comes across as not being genuine. So during a consultation will really actually help you understand the root of why you're going to the United States and help you frame that for a visa officer. Okay. So Murtaza is an EB3 candidate and he doesn't have any previous travel history abroad. Um, will it make a difference to the interviewer? For EB3 visas, not really. They might ask a little bit, but if you don't have travel history, you don't have travel history. And in any case, an EB3 visa category is for an immigrant visa to legally immigrate to the US. So you're not going to have as many problems. Travel history is not as important to immigrant visa applications. Okay, so Nasir says, "If my parents have a bunch of properties, what's the perfect way to explain it to a visa officer?" So, it is good to bring the housing documents that you have, even if they don't ask for them, and even if you don't, if you don't get asked about them, because then at least you have them in case they ask. I always tell clients to make sure you bring everything with you just in case you're asked for it, because then if they ask, you have it, but if you don't have it or you don't bring anything, then they have to put you into 21G administrative processing, and that's going to delay your case. So you always want to bring everything, but you just want to make sure that you don't, shove everything through the window and give it to the officer when they don't want to see it. So if your parents have a bunch of properties, just make sure that you're able to explain that clearly to the consular officer, and they might want to know a little bit about the history of your parents. What are their education levels? What kind of jobs do they have? Just be prepared to talk about their life situations. You would be surprised at how many student visa applicants will come in and, consular officers, visa officers will ask them about their families and their parents, and they have no idea. They're like, I don't really know what my parents do for work. And that seems very strange to a visa officer. So just make sure that you understand your parents' situation so that you explain the whole context in addition to the fact that they own a number of properties. Okay, so Paratosh asked, I have received a 221G response to submit further documents. How long can I expect, Okay, how long can I expect from the New Delhi embassy to get a response? So traditionally before the pandemic, it would take probably a week or two if you had to submit additional documentation. But again, it depends on what type of documentation you submitted. If it's just something that's like that you were missing, like, oh, you forgot your I-20 or your I-20 needed to be updated or you needed to get a new passport. That's going to be something that can be very quickly resolved. But if you're submitting further documentation for a more complicated situation, like, what was your major? Can we have a detailed CV? Those things might require additional processing, which means that it'll take more time, probably, between weeks and months. So again, it's really hard to answer that question without knowing what types of documents. But if this is something that you're concerned about, either sign up for an Argo consultation at argovisa.com or send us an email at hello@argovisa.com. Okay, will there be any effect on the embassy because of the new Omicron variant? So the State Department is watching the development very closely. And because it's still in the early stages, I haven't heard of anything happening outside of South Africa. I imagine in South Africa, they have probably closed the embassy and consulate because of the variant. But again, we just kind of have to see. I know that scientists are still unsure of um, how easily spreadable this new variant is. So a lot of it will depend on that. And I think the State Department will act accordingly. Okay, Minaj asked, once an F1 visa is denied, do you suggest the same consulate? Yes, I do. And here's the reason why. If you've been denied at an embassy or consulate, if you decide to go apply somewhere else, that is going to look like you're shopping for a place that has easier standards. And because all of the State Department, embassy, and consulate computers and networks are connected, they will be able to see the notes of the refusal from the previous embassy and consulate. And especially if you're denied in your home country and you try to apply outside of your home country, that's a really bad idea because the people who are most used to dealing with international citizens from your home country is going to be at your home embassy or consulate. And if you go somewhere else, visa officers will not be as confident. They're just going to say, hey, you have to go home to your home country because they better understand your culture and what is going on to make a decision. So, um, but again, you'll want to be prepared before your next interview. So feel free to ask us. Okay, so someone said, my my visitor's visa was rejected 3 times, and recently my student visa was rejected in November of 2021. Do I still have hope if I apply for an F1 visa? Mohammed, anything is possible. Like I said, I have approved visas for people as a consular officer after they've been denied 6 or 7 times. But keep in mind that it does get harder the more, denials that you get, and I'm assuming that you haven't worked with us, but it's just really, really important that you know why you were refused. You might think you know why, but you really don't know why. So make sure you sign up for a consultation so we can help you. Okay. So, okay, so I see some repeat questions.